The first question is for you, Jan. Fundraising should be the pillar of every organization to bring in resources to achieve its mission. You have shared your concerns that fundraising can perpetuate racist systems. What are your thoughts on changing fundraising models that keep perpetuating racist systems within fundraising and philanthropy?
We need to really learn history in this country and everywhere. So, as a sector, we have a history of donor-centric fundraising, appeasing the donor, telling stories that often stereotype, exaggerate, and quite frankly, disrespect people of color. Communications, programming, messaging, and more all center on what we feel will make the donor happiest, make them feel good, make them feel that they're doing something important. This has been really harmful. And I know this because I've done it myself. Community centric fundraising, on the other hand, is about elevating the voices of an organization's community. Instead of reaching or reacting to what donors will be happiest with, you go to the community, you learn from them what is working, what is not, what they need. It's humanizing an approach that will, I believe, result in better services, one that will dismantle oppressive systems. Juneteenth, a couple of the programs I attended, was really empowering for me to really think about how Black people built this country, their strength, their fortitude, how immigrants in general have made this country so strong, and really changing the narrative. And so there are a lot of enlightening moments about, the power you have as a white person in this space to describe people one way or the other, the way that's going to appeal to certain people, or using your power to change the narrative.
I think what was so important for someone like me, a woman of color, to do that is the way that we learn to storytell is very different. And so we're using our lived experiences, obviously, but changing the face of the storyteller is so important because we can speak across all communities, right? We have been in many different spaces, not just in the spaces people assume that we have grown up in. So acquiring that toolkit, across the spectrum of our life gives us the ability to speak to different kinds of donors. And I think that's really the strength of not only women, but women of color. Women are also the center of community in a lot of different ways. Tiffany and Sonya talked about their sorority. That is a community anchored organization where they're garnering incredible experience, networking, and support to the community. There are churches, there are schools, there are so many other ways that women of color acquire skills around storytelling and understanding community very differently. So I took all of that experience and really poured into my development work. And I think what was so empowering was I had two CEOs who truly understood that I could help teach a fundraising chair on a board how to do the same. So I learned early that the most effective board fundraising on a board, at least for me, was empowering board members to do all of the work, to do the storytelling, to teach their peers, to support and encourage them. So I had the good experience of having some fantastic board chairs. What I look for in a fundraising board chair is high energy, great leadership skills, team building, and community building. If I have some of that and some organizational skills, then that to me is like a really great recipe. So those two CEOs who I work with, they understood from the gate that I was going to be a teacher in fundraising more than anything as a development person, and also a partner to them. And I think that is the most important thing, is really having a CEO who will be open to the conversation about what the partnership should look like. A lot of times egos potentially could get in the way. And so it's really important to have that transparent conversation. All right, you have two very capable people who can go out there and get money together. How do you want to do this?
I've never articulated what you just said in terms of our lived experience. You know, I actually was at an independent sectors meeting last week, and I kind of brought up that my standpoint, right, matters. And I think we're saying sort of the same thing, you know, because I've been in so many different spaces for so many years and able to navigate all different types of people. And there's a lot of value in that. And this program, we've talked a lot about, you know, our purpose in terms of this work and aligning with the organization's vision and mission. And so that's a lot of what you're also talking about. It was more than just being a development practitioner. It's more than the skills of fundraising. It's really aligning in your own purpose, your voice, you know, your vision in terms of the world that you want to live in. Tiffany, can you talk about what you need from your development officer? When we connected, you talked a little bit about that, and the board as well, to be successful in your fundraising as a Black new CEO.
It is a part of my divine assignment to be able to do this work to free people from the guises of racism and oppression, xenophobia, and all the things, right? So when you ask me what I need from my development officer in a board, is that understanding that this work is bigger than you. And if it's not directly tied to your assignment, your efforts are going to be temporary. And that was a conversation I had in the interview process. So they said yes to me, and I'm still here 8 months later, right? So I need the confidence to know that they are doing the work reflective of our full mission. Our mission is to eliminate racism, empower women, and seek dignity and justice for all. No short order, but I can't just have you latch on to one part of that mission. Right? If you just want to empower women, this is not the organization for you. And we have to be okay with creating a space to say that we are eliminating racism, empowering women, and seeking dignity, justice, and peace for all. If you can't eat it all, let's evacuate the seat, if you will. So that is extremely important for us to establish in the beginning. And then the last thing that I will share is I need my board and my development officers to know that two things can be true. The execution that we're talking about that comes from, you know, doing the DEI work and doing this work through a lens of equity and freeing us, execution requires effort, and effort is exhausting. But so is poverty, racism, xenophobia, oppression, and all of those things, right? So I don't need you to come tell me, oh my God, this is so, create that space, because I have to create it external the organization, and we got to keep it moving. So yes, execution is exhausting, but so is racism and misogyny. So let's choose which one we want to exert our energy to, right? So those are some things that I definitely need: that awareness, that ability to have the conversation and to continue to do the work outside of the press release and the camera time and the panel time, right?
This is, you know, such a critical conversation, because it speaks to even bigger, you know, bolder actions that I think we need to take as a country. We need bold action. We need change. There's been, you know, there has to be an intentional funding initiative based on reparations, in my opinion, to address the harm that's been done by what one BIPOC leader aptly refers to as philanthropic redlining. And I read that and I was really taken by that whether intentional or not, the data shows, and some data is reliable, the data shows that Black and Brown run organizations are underfunded, and for that reasons have smaller staffs, have smaller budgets, have smaller reserves, have all these things that really put them at a systemic disadvantage. So what are the bold steps that we're going to take, you know, to change that? So data is important, but how we view that data is really important too, as white people. So what I learned from my Black and Brown colleagues, white people running foundations, organizations, and in other positions of power need to understand the data through an anti-racist lens and not explain the data away defensively with blame and a racist focused on perceived BIPOC deficits. There's been a history of, what can we do to go into those communities and help them change? That victim mentality, that blame mentality, that mentality of there's something inherently wrong with Black and Brown communities. And as white people, we can change them to be more white rather than looking at ourselves and seeing what the systems have done. And this is hard, right? Because we, as white people, listen with bias. I mean, I certainly have. And it takes work, it takes learning, unlearning, self-awareness, to evolve, to change behaviors rooted in bias and racism. And I speak from personal experience, not proudly, but white people have to come to the table with a sense of self-awareness about the harm that we've done. And, in this country, we have a myriad of social issues. And really troubling things happening in various states, in New York State, in our country. And unless we start as a country to face that and to listen and respond to the lived experiences, as we've heard, the real history of people of color, we're not going to solve any of our social problems. We're just not. We're going to, keep spinning our wheels. We have to listen and we have to respect that experience.
Lucria, you talked about dismantling white supremacy culture within nonprofits through equitable board governance. Can you talk about how the YMCA's board is centering equity?
I sit on the national board of the YMCA, and I recognize sitting at that level that I could make change. So what I've been doing is I gathered up a group of CEOs from across the country because I was hearing stories about women of color, people of color sitting in seats and not being safe, as I was talking about, with their boards, not being supported by their boards. So what Tiffany is doing is exactly what we're engaging in at a national level. We developed a workshop. We held 2 summits last year. I think Jan attended one of them, where we held national conversation on what equitable governance means, not just diversifying your board, because that's usually where the conversation starts or stops, I should say, but literally digging in to helping board members develop an anti-racist and DEI lens. It is beyond diversifying, right? To truly be transformational is to have your board understand its mission impact and what they're there to do to reach that mission impact. So being transformational means you have to look at the composition of your board and really change who is on it, reflecting not only what you want in terms of your mission, but who you're trying to serve. So we focus a lot on that, and then developing norms so that people understand, all right, there's now a Black gay woman in this room. Are we tokenizing her? Are we allowing her voice to be fully at the table? Are we letting her lead? So those are the kinds of conversations we're having at the crawling phase. And at the second phase, it is developing a set of equitable principles, because we believe just as you have a marketing lens, a finance lens, a real estate lens, a board member should also have a DEI and anti-racist lens. It is not the person, the Black person or the Latina who's there to be your DEI person, right? To be very clear that DEI is subject matter expertise. And just because someone's a person of color doesn't mean they hold that expertise. There are 3 kinds of relationships that I've seen that we talk about in the Y. There is the relationship with the CEO and the board where the CEO hides everything, where the CEO wants to control and doesn't share all of the bad stuff potentially, right? The second kind of relationship is the board chair who wants to operate the organization, who really wants to talk about programming, tell the CEO what they should be doing on a day-to-day basis, and have the board really lean into things that are not governance. The sweet spot obviously is both truly understanding that one is there to run the operation, the other body is there to govern. And there are going to be times where the lines are kind of gray as to what's operations and what's governance, right? But you figure that out together. Obviously, there's plenty of playbook instruction in terms of what governance is, but really having a board chair who understands their role in infusing that DEI and anti-racist lens into the work by doing the things, not having DEI, for example, sit in a committee somewhere and only having them chime in during the committee report. We believe DEI should sit in governance, right? Just like in an organization, it should sit in your executive operation. That way it is truly infused and you have other professionals thinking about it. So that sweet spot is regular conversation with your board chair and your CEO, but then also grooming your CDO to really understand what their role can be and helping the board develop in fundraising. I really think like that tripartite or whatever you say, that trifecta of the three of them, because the CDO is really important in the life of a board as well, and helping understand how they can make greater impact.
This is part of my mantra. If you are what you do, then when you aren't, you're not. So the moment you become the role, the moment that you become so connected to the affiliations and accolades that come with this title that gives you access and platform, who are you when all that is gone? So when I talk about showing up and doing this work as a part of my divine assignment, it's because I understand that if I am what I do, then when I'm not doing that, I'm not, right? So if you are what you do, then when you aren't, you're not. And then the other piece is sometimes some of the things we're exposed to or we experience is to strengthen how we serve in this particular assignment.
We are living in some crazy times and, we're just going to have to keep pushing forward. This is ongoing work. Just remember the biggest thing is that it's in every conversation, every interaction, decisions. Take a moment to unpack. Look at things through a lens of equity and inclusion. We're much better in terms of diversity. We've paid a lot of attention to the D. We need to pay much more attention to the equity and inclusion part. Thank you again, Jan, Lucria, and Tiffany. So grateful to you. And I will be in touch. I want to make sure we stay connected.